I've just been trying to record this video down in a nice sheltered place because it's quite windy today and got disturbed by a herd of elephants, so I've come up to a slightly higher and safer place. But if you see anything behind me, let me know down there. When I walked up, there was a little family of warthogs having a mud bath. Today I just want to talk for about 10 minutes about our mounting global problems and the chaos ensuing, and why all our sort of COP 25 conferences are just ending in increasing chaos, why we don't ever achieve SDGs, etc. There's a very, very, luckily for us, basic root cause of these things. And the good news is that we don't have thousands and thousands of problems to solve. We actually have thousands of mounting symptoms of one problem. So that's very good news. So I just want to talk about this today, and excuse it because it's a little bit windy, but I'd rather be able to finish the video. So humans are a tool-using animal, and we are using a genetically inherited way of making decisions that's found in every tool-using animal. Did you know that every single one of us is making decisions in the narrow context of only three things? We are either meeting a need, fulfilling a desire, or trying to solve a problem. And those three contexts fit into three categories. They're either social, financial, or ecological. And it's the same whether it's an individual decision or an institution or government developing a policy. Making decisions or developing policies like this is genetically embedded in every single human being. Our decision-making process is biologically inherited. We are born with it, and it is as natural as breathing. And it is the root cause of our mounting global problems. Our management is destroying us. Our simple contexts of meeting needs, desires, or addressing problems was perfect for a time when our only tools or technology were sticks and stones, and our decisions were basic and one-dimensional. We were only managing ourselves socially, existing in harmony and balance with nature or our environment, just like any other tool-using animal is still doing to this day. Our actions had no other dimensions or any further damaging consequences to consider because there weren't any. We could do no harm to the environment with our simple decisions and basic stick and stone tools and technology. That inherited way of making decisions is the cause of almost all our problems today, because unlike the other tool-using animals, we are no longer only making basic social decisions for ourselves. Our problems are mounting symptoms of the fact that humans began to manage more than the other tool-using animals. But we haven't, in all of history, ever made any adjustments to account for that fact. The gradual but drastic change began after humans learned to control fire. Fire enabled us to develop more and more advanced tools and technology, which, over millions of years, started to cause a change in our social behavior within our ecosystems. And with our advancing tools and technology, we slowly began to manipulate our environments that we were living in. And we ended up actually managing nature. And at some point in all of this, we also added a financial dimension. But the change started off being really gradual, and we're still able to meet almost all our short-term objectives without seeing or physically experiencing at the time the inevitable knock-on consequences that began happening, because they're only experienced later on and quite often much further away from the decision, policy, or action themselves. So we didn't connect long-term knock-on damage to our decision. So we were no longer just making basic decisions for ourselves. We had started making decisions for or managing ourselves and our institutions, our environment, and our economies. And those three things are inseparable. Everything we use or consume comes from nature. No human being on Earth can exist without healthy food, water, and air. Therefore, no society or economy can exist without nature. They exist as one interdependent, inseparable, self-organizing, unpredictable, complex whole. So we have never in all of history adapted to that change. What we should have done is broaden our narrow inherited decision-making contexts to account for the fact that we had added 2 more dimensions to our decisions, and that all 3 dimensions would now have to be simultaneously taken into consideration before making any decision to prevent our actions having damaging long-term consequences. But none of us are born being capable of simultaneously managing that added complexity. So we continue to use our inherited decision-making process, and we're managing our social and now added ecological and economic decisions in isolation of each other in the same way. And we do it from the perspective of our needs or problems in any of those aspects. As our technology advanced, it increased. Almost every decision we made increasingly began to involve and impact society, economies, and nature. It's not as if we don't know it is happening. We are well aware that most of our management situations these days have those aspects to consider. But no matter how comprehensively anyone looks at any situation, even when we bring in interdisciplinary teams of scientists to work on really complex management situations or policies, because we are genetically predisposed to manage our issues one at a time from the perspective of a need or problem in that aspect, what happens is that at the point of the decision itself, our inherited perspective kicks in, and the whole web of complexity or the whole situation is unintentionally broken down, and we reduce it to manageable parts. And this is usually by experts offering advice on what action to take from the perspective of the problems in their specific area of either social, economic, or ecological expertise. So this results in us inevitably isolating and breaking down the social, financial, and ecological dimensions and separating them from each other. And as soon as we make a decision for one aspect, we set off an unavoidable domino effect. And that decision or policy or action will, at some point, knock on to affect the others, often long after or far away from the decision or policy itself. Whatever we do to one will end up affecting the rest at some point. This is the cause of our management resulting in rapidly increasing chaos. Listen very carefully, I shall say this bit only once. We are trying to use the same outdated decision-making process that's causing our problems to try and solve them. By isolating and making our decisions in the narrow context of our mounting social, economic, or ecological problems, which are all symptoms of our decisions being made in the narrow context of separate social, economic, or ecological problems in the first place, see the problem? The more the balance is upset, the more things are speeding up, culminating in global desertification and its now many, many symptoms, which includes climate change. We have to get off this hamster wheel. We have to adapt and change our worldview. Instead of looking at any situation from the perspective of the need or problem, we have to learn how to look at our problems from the perspective of the whole situation by developing a far broader context to guide our decisions. We know why our management is causing problems, and we know how to fix it. In the early 1980s, there was a massive breakthrough in developing and testing a decision-making framework that empowers and enables any decision maker to manage and cater for the unique and full social, financial, and ecological complexity of any decision before deciding on any action. The framework was rigorously put through the test over a period of 2 years by over 2,000 top scientists in the US. And they were running current policies through the process. And by doing that, they deduced that all policies in the US were unsound. And when testing their own policies through the framework, they could not make it fail. So we know how to stop our actions and policies causing disaster, and we have solved the riddle of human inability to manage complexity, which has plagued humanity for over 10,000 years, after the collapse of over 20 civilizations in the past with their agriculture destroying their soil. But because our inherited decision-making process is so unconscious and natural, this change is not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy because it involves a conscious effort and a shift to learning how to make decisions and develop policies in line with a far broader, holistic context to make sure that we never lose sight of any of those three dimensions of our decisions. And we do this by writing a meaningful statement, tying our physical and financial stability to ecosystem health. And then we use our holistic context as a magnetic north to guide all our actions. And before taking any action, we run that potential action, practice, or policy through this guiding and filtering process of the holistic management framework, which guarantees that the best action, practice, or policy will become apparent because we are first considering and testing the full complexity of the decision, making sure that we choose the most socially, financially, and ecologically appropriate action we can take at any given time in any given situation. Just imagine when we have the first government using this framework to develop policies. Whoever does this will be the first nation in history to be successfully managing and balancing complexity, because they will be simultaneously addressing their entire country's social, economic, and ecological needs and problems from the broad, inclusive perspective of a national holistic context developed by all citizens, never losing sight of the fact that that country's physical and economic stability of the entire country and its people are entirely dependent on and inseparable from the ecological health of the country. And right now, we have globally we have world leaders being advised, sorry, I've got my bunny flies, being advised by experts in agriculture, economics, social, from those narrow perspective of those fields, when what our governments right now need is experts in helping filter those policy suggestions through this decision-making framework to ensure that it's taking that whole web of complexity of the country and its people and ecological stability into consideration before taking that action.